The late Roman Republic spawned many influential figures that left a lasting impact on Roman society. One such person was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, the man who created the precedent for Caesar to march on Rome and thus helped precipitate the formation of the Roman Empire.
Sulla was born in 138 BC as a member of the patrician family Cornelia, who became politically relevant due to the actions of their ancestor Rufinus. Rufinus was a consul who was expelled from the Senate for possessing more than 10 pounds of silver plate, a legal act that doomed his family to insignificance. He faced a significant setback when he was a young teen when his father died and left nothing to Sulla in his inheritance, which reduced him to utter poverty. Due to his impoverishment, he was unable to afford entering public life, which was expected to him as he belonged to a noble family. Due to his impoverished upbringing, Sulla was scorned from Roman high society and instead consorted with plebeian theatrical groups. Ancient sources describe Sulla's early life as excessively indulgent. Plutarch stated he spent much time with actors and buffoons and shared a dissolute life. He possessed boundless charisma and was able to befriend people with ease, which benefited him throughout his adult life. Solus claims that despite his decadent lifestyle, Sulla also performed the duties expected of him as a Roman noble. Sulla's rise to prominence began in 107 BCE when he became quaestor and served Gaius Marius' army in the ongoing Tridentine War. Sulla proved himself to be a capable commander, and his remarkable charisma and experience with consorting with the lower classes endeared him to the soldiers under his command. Sulla's main accomplishment in the war was when he was able to befriend the king of Mauritia, Bacchus, and negotiate for him to betray his son-in-law Jugurtha, who was the primary target of the Roman Senate. Sulla became personally involved in a scheme to capture him, and thus was directly responsible for the ending of the hostilities. Marius was bothered by the acclaim Sulla received for his accomplishments, as it took away attention from him as the commander of the war. When Sulla returned to Rome, further division between the two began to grow, as Sulla often bragged about his accomplishments and took pride in the fact that his actions were able to end the conflict. Marius received the triumph for being commander of the forces in Lydia. However, his status as a novus homo and a popularis made him unpopular among sections of the Roman nobilities, whose failures in the war led him to be humiliated by the upstart Marius. Those who held contempt for Marius found reluctant comfort in Sulla, who undermined Marius' status through his boasting for political gain. They preferred Sulla, for at least he belonged to a patrician family, despite his destitution and atypical upbringing. The friction between the two would only grow over time, and would have devastating repercussions for the Republic. The conflict between the two were put on a temporary hold when the Cimbri and the Teutons began to move into Roman territory. Marius was put in command of the new threat and relied on Sulla's military prowess once again, appointing him as legate. However, Sulla left Marius' command in 102 to join the staff of Quintus Catulus in order to gain more prestige for an attempted political run. Following the Cimbrian War, Sulla decided to run for political office and finally succeeded in becoming urban praetor in 97 BC with the use of bribes and bragging of his military accomplishments. After his first year of praetorship, he was assigned to be the governor of Sicilia, where he was tasked with restoring Ariobarzanes to the throne of Cappadocia, who was ousted by Rome and Sulla's future enemy, Mithridates IV of Pontus. Mithridates became an issue for Rome when he began to expand into neighboring territories in Anatolia, which were friendly to the Roman state. In 105 BC, Mithridates invaded Paphlagonia and Cappadocia, installing his son as king in Cappadocia. Rome responded by declaring both areas free territories that were not subject to any kings, which forced compliance from Mithridates. The Cappadocians, however, asked to elect a king as they were unsure what to do with the new freedom they were granted. They decided to restore Ariobarzanes to their throne. And after treachery, however, Mithridates seemingly abided by Senate's command and ordered his son to withdraw from the area. When Ariobarzanes returned to the kingdom, agents of Mithridates forced him out of the kingdom and reinstalled Mithridates' son. The Senate found this intolerable and ordered Sulla to march on Cappadocia with the intent of reinstalling Ariobarzanes through military means. Few details survive about the campaign, but Sulla was eventually able to push out the Pontic forces from Cappadocia due to his excellent leadership. He was granted the title Imperator from his soldiers. During his campaigns in Cappadocia, Sulla became the first person to come in contact with an embassy of the Parthian Empire, who were interested in establishing contact with Rome. Parthians were interested in securing their own borders, wished to parley with the Romans as they were worried over possible Roman intervention in Armenia. Sulla treated the ambassador disrespectfully, considering Persians to be of no consequence. Despite his arrogant attitude, he was able to secure a treaty of friendship between the two nations. The Persian ambassador Orobazes was put to death by the king of Parthia for being outmaneuvered by Sulla at the beginning of negotiations, despite him being ultimately satisfied with the end result. The conflict between Rome and Mithridates eventually died down, allowing Sulla to return to Rome in 93 BC, where he was immediately prosecuted for allegedly extorting money from Ariobarzanes by a young senator called Marcius Censorius. The prosecution was unable to unearth any evidences and the charges were dropped. This event would remain in Sulla's memory, as Censorius would ultimately be killed during the dictatorship of Sulla, as he was not quick to forget his slight upon him. Meanwhile, the Senate were in discussions to re-engage war with Mithridates. Marius eagerly seeked out war in peace as he was getting stifled by the automatate Senate who despised him. In order to gain power and glory, he wished to be placed in command of the army. The Senate were also eager to start a renewed conflict with Mithridates, but instead wanted to put Sulla at the command of the forces just to spite Marius. This continued to place an increased strain and tension between the two men, who were both attempting to use their military prowess to gain political power in Rome.
The tensions between the two were yet again put on hold in 91 BC, when the social war would break out between the Roman Republic and the Latin tribes of Italy. The cause of war was due to Italian allies of Rome demanding Roman citizenship. Sulla and the Optimates were against the enfranchisement of the Italians, and thus conflict was inevitable. The war would last for 4 years and would be quelled by the combined forces of Sulla and Marius. Sulla, who began life in obscurity, would finally be propelled to the consul through his condemnable actions during the war.
When Sulla became consul, he sought further glory and wished to be placed at the command of the Roman army against Mithridates. Marius also wished to be the leader of those forces, but eventually Sulla was granted command either way, leaving him furious and bitter. As consul, Sulla would become also in conflict with the popularis Publius Sulpicius, who would try to implement legislation that empowered the Italians and weakened the Optimate faction Sulla was now leading.
Sulpicius and Marius passed through legislation when Sulla was away from Rome, causing him to drop the siege of Nola, in which he was leading, and return to Rome and declare Fidelia. He was greeted with mass rioting that forced him to seek out Marius' support to end the unrest. Meeting at the home of Marius, he was surrounded by an angry mob, giving Marius leverage to demand an end to the Fidelia and compliance with the Popularis legislative agenda. Forced to choose between submission or violence, he begrudgingly accepted Marius' demands, leaving him humiliated and filled with rage. Marius and Sulpicius would then become overconfident and remove Sulla from the command of the planned war against Mithridates. This insult from Marius would be a breaking point for Sulla, who would lead his army into Rome for this dishonorable act, stating he was going to liberate Rome from tyrants who wronged him and impose tyranny on the people. Sulla then marched into Rome with his army, who did not hesitate to throw their lot with their beloved leader. The reason for their undying loyalty was in part due to reforms of the army made by Marius, which ironically ended up making troops to be more loyal to their commander rather than Roman nation. Marius reacted to this news by fleeing Rome with some of his supporters, but not before executing allies and friends of Sulla. When Sulla had full control of the city, he had called for a conteo to proclaim that the actions he took were not due to personal slights, but was necessary for Rome as it had fallen in the hands of traitors and tyrants. During this upheaval in 88 BC, Mithridates took advantage of the situation in Rome by invading territories and allies in Asia and Greece. Mithridates ordered Greek cities to slaughter Romans in their territories, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Romans in the area. As a result of Mithridates' carnage through the Roman territories, Sulla had to leave the capital to engage Mithridates' forces. After fierce fighting, Sulla was able to force Mithridates into making a peace agreement that was favorable to the Romans, thus ending hostilities once more. With the death of Marius in 86 BC, Sulla turned his attention to Lucius Cinna, the new leader of the Marian faction, who retook Rome when Sulla left for Greece. Following the peace, Sulla dispensed justice on those who supported Rome and those who betrayed it. He deprived rebel cities from their rights of freedom and made them subjects of Rome, forcing them to pay taxes. Those who remained allies gained land and territories appropriated from the traitors. In 83 BC, after destroying the Marian faction in Italy, Sulla retook the city and established himself as dictator. As dictator, Sulla ordered the execution of those who fought against him, starting a reign of political repression and violence. He enacted the first proscription in Roman history, leading to the death of praetors, consuls, senators, and even those who remained uninvolved in politics. Sulla then established his new reforms in an attempt to strengthen the Senate and stifle the Popularis agenda. One change he made was to weaken the tribune of the plebs, which he viewed as dangerous. He increased the number of senators from 300 to 600 and formalized In 79 BC, he resigned his dictatorship and retired to his villas at either Puteo or Cumae, where he spent a considerable amount of time fishing and hunting. He continued to spend his time with his theatrical friends and set out to write his memoirs. Despite being retired, his allies were able to use his influence to push his agenda despite him no longer being actively involved in politics. He finally perished at 78 BC of a hemorrhage, ending the life of one of the most prominent citizens in the Roman Republic. His actions left a profound effect on the development of Roman history, as his dictatorship and actions paved the way for the fall of the Roman Republic and its transition to the empire. Without Sulla, there would be no Caesar, there would be no Augustus, and there would be no empire.